Hello, and welcome to the turbulent world of Middle East soccer, or Mideast Soccer podcast. I'm your host, James Dorsey. Please subscribe to my newsletter and or YouTube channel, where you can click the notification button for more updates. Also, allow me to thank all who have demonstrated their appreciation for my column by becoming paid subscribers. This enables me to ensure that it continues to have maximum impact. Maintaining free distribution means that news websites, blogs, and newsletters across the globe can republish it. I launched my column 12 years ago. To borrow a phrase from an early proprietor of The Observer, it offers readers, listeners, and viewers the scoop of interpretation. If you are able and willing to support the column, please become a paid subscriber by clicking on Substack on the subscription button at www.jamesmdorsey.substack.com and choosing one of the subscription options. Thank you, take care, and best wishes. Russian President Vladimir Putin has inspired civilisationalist leaders to emerge from the woodwork and publicly define their states as civilizational rather than national entities. These leaders speak of civilizational or ethnic worlds with borders that transcend national frontiers, not nation states. How far they may wish to push claims that challenge the nation state-based international order is likely to be heavily influenced by whether Mr. Putin achieves his civilizationalist goals in Ukraine. Last month, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban became the latest leader to redefine the nation state he governs. Speaking on Romanian territory in the predominantly ethnic Hungarian town of Vaslib-Tusnad in Transylvania, a one-time Austro-Hungarian possession that is home to a Hungarian minority, Mr. Orban left no doubt that his definition of the Hungarian motherland included Transylvania and other regions in the Carpathian Basin beyond Hungary's borders, populated by ethnic Hungarians. Serbian Interior Minister Alexander Vulin articulated a similar view of Serbia's borders a year earlier. The task for this generation of politicians is to form a Serb world, that is, to unite Serbs wherever they live, Mr. Vulin told a political gathering in Belgrade in 2021, attended by President Aleksandar Vučić. Widely viewed as Moscow's man in Belgrade, Mr. Vulin said, for the Serb world to gel, Serbia needs to be economically successful, well-led, and have an army that is able to protect Serbia and Serbs wherever they live. Speaking the same day on television, Mr. Vulin went further by insisting that all Serbs should be united in one state. However, he later modified his statements by saying that unification would have to occur peacefully, as it happened in post-Cold War Germany. Even so, the thinking of far-right ideologue Alexander Dugin reverberates in positions adopted by Mr. Vulin, as it does in the civilisationalist framing of geopolitics by Messrs. Orban and Putin. This is a war of ideas. We are not part of the global civilization. We are a civilization by ourselves. We had no other possibility to prove that Huntington was right without attacking Ukraine, Mr. Dugin asserts. He was referring to the late Harvard University political scientist, Samuel Huntington, who controversially predicted a post-Cold War clash of civilizations that would be fought not between countries, but between cultures. The degree of Mr. Dugin's influence on Mr. Putin is a matter of debate. often dubbed in the media as Putin's brain, and a Rasputin-like character, Mr. Dugin appears to be in and out of favor in the Kremlin's innermost circles. Similarly, Mr. Dugin has influenced Central Europeans, but to what degree may be debatable. Nevertheless, even those skeptical describe the far-right ideologue as one of Russia's foremost political theorists. Mr. Dugin wrote a hugely influential ultra-nationalist tome, The Foundations of Geopolitics, the Geopolitical Future of Russia, which Russian military academies use as a textbook. The book envisions a clash of civilizations between the West and a Eurasian bloc supported by Russia. It also insists that Serbia is Russia. There is no doubt that especially that 1990s work on global geopolitics, with its various distinctions, profoundly influenced the Russian military and set the stage for a lot of the country's geopolitical ambitions going forward, said political theorist Matt McManus. While there is no, or at best circumstantial evidence of direct contact between Mr. Dugin and Messrs. Vučić and Orban, it is clear that their political environments interact with one of civilisationalism's leading ideologues. For example, Mr. Vulin hosted Mr. Dugin on his visit to Belgrade in 2019, at a moment when the Serb capital was rife with reports about Russian spying. Going back in history, journalist Predrag Popovic recalls meeting Mr. Dugin twice in Belgrade in the 1990s with the help of Mr. Vučić at the headquarters of the far-right Serbian Radical Party, of which Mr. Vučić was a member at the time. Mr. Popovic quotes Mr. Vučić as describing Mr. Dugin as the most important thinker and political strategist of modern Russia, and Serbia's greatest friend. Mr. Popovic notes that recently Mr. Vučić refrained from sending Mr. Dugin his condolences when the ideologue's daughter, Daria Dugina, was killed in a car bombing in Moscow in August. Mr. Vučić has often used Mr. Vulin as his frontman in relations with Russia, in an effort not to provoke US and European ire. Ironically, Mr. Orban, in his more liberal days, banned a 2014 far-right gathering in Budapest, organized by the Montana-based National Policy Institute, at which Mr. Dugin was scheduled to keynote. However, the Hungarian capital has since become a hub for the European and American far right. Actos Media, a keynote in the far-right Budapest-based network, published the first full-text English translations of Mr. Dugin's books. The threat posed by the civilisationalist ambitions of men like Messrs. Putin, Orban, and Vulin goes beyond the challenge to the rule of law and the notion of territorial integrity enshrined in the United Nations Charter. It has fueled racism and bolstered exclusionist ideologies like Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's anti-Muslim Hindutva, Hindu nationalism. It has also emboldened the Myanmar junta that, according to human rights group Fortify Rights, is waging genocide by attrition against the beleaguered Rohingya communities of Rakhine State. Mr. Orban recently took a leaf out of Mr. Dugin's book on geopolitics when he declared in his widely denounced speech in Romania that he doesn't want Europeans mixing with non-Europeans. This is why we have always fought. We are willing to mix with one another, but we do not want to become peoples of mixed race, Mr. Orban said. Speaking days later at a news conference, Mr. Orban insisted that this is not a racial issue for us, This is a question of culture. Quite simply, our civilization should be preserved as it is now. In his book about the United States, Mr. Dugin argued that it is especially important to introduce geopolitical disorder, encouraging all kinds of separatism and ethnic, social, and racial conflicts, actively supporting all dissident movements, extremist, racist, and sectarian groups. Mr. Orban and Mr. Vulin's civilizational worlds apply the bill to countries that increasingly only nominally fall within the orbit of the United States and the European Union. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Also, thank you to all who have demonstrated their appreciation for my column by becoming paid subscribers. This allows me to ensure that it continues to have maximum impact. Maintaining free distribution means that news websites, blogs, and newsletters across the globe can republish it. I launched my column 12 years ago. To borrow a phrase from an early proprietor of The Observer, it offers readers, listeners, and viewers the scoop of interpretation. If you are able and willing to support the column, please become a paid subscriber by clicking on Substack on the subscription button at www.jamesmdorsey.substack.com and choosing one of the subscription options. Please join me for my next podcast in the coming days. Thank you. Take care and best wishes.